And today we have the special and unique privilege, as we do typically once a year, to hear from the person who has given the helm of leadership for this group. Bengt Johnson is serving as the president of the fellowship, and we are so honored and privileged to hear from him today, to hear his vision and hear what God has laid on his heart for this group. And so I'll let him share a little bit more about his background and experience, because it's quite diverse, and not everybody has heard your story, Bengt. So that'll be fun to kind of hear the different paths on which the Lord has led you to bring you to where you are today. So we just and also Randy, we've just spent about half an hour praying for our leaders and for our city and for our world and different folks. That's something that we are committed to doing every week as well. So welcome, Randy. Welcome back, Chandler. It's great to see you here as well. Son of Margaret and Tom, and guitar aficionado as well. So it's great to see you, Chandler. So we'll turn it over to you, Bengt, and you can lead us out.
Thank you, Garrick. Thanks for taking over that part. I'm going to sort of split. Yeah, excellent. We got the whole house of Simons. Glad to have all three of you here. And Gary, good to see you again. I wanted to real quick, just got this text from our old friend Jerry Sellers wrote me, and we did pray for the Ukraine. So I was thinking of this. So I didn't add it in our prayers, but just want to mention. Jerry wrote me this morning, last night late. Just hung up with Doug Burley in DC. He's hosting 11 Ukrainian college-age men this weekend. Let's spread the word to pray mightily for God's grace and the binding of the enemy. Amen.
Amen.
So we prayed for that, and hopefully for peace and little loss of life, and for justice and laws to be followed. Yeah. So I'm going to split this into two parts. I want to just briefly talk about the fellowship and what's going on and things that are coming up this year. Some special things, some new ideas, some old one. Give you a couple, as we usually do, a scripture or two to kind of have a set of theme for the time. And then just tell you a little bit about myself, not the whole story, but in fact, more of this, what I started calling a pilgrimage this year with my mom, and show you some of the things I've been reading just to sort of give me a foundation entering into it. And then also I got some pictures I'll throw on the screen from my year, and how, what we've been trying to do with mom and how she's changed during that time. So for the fellowship, we've had a great year all last year, 2021, a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of folks come, a lot of people that are, came from different places in the country. As Garrick mentioned, full year of having women with us, and when a lot of them were coming a lot and shared a lot. I wanted to move from the themes this year that we're going to go into is sort of prayer and small group gatherings. And the idea we had last year was, Jesus sent the disciples out 2 by 2 to go out to the towns and villages and preach the gospel. And continuing on that idea, taking the first one is the Matthew 18. You guys are well familiar with this, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am. And so, we've always had this idea that we don't have to be large or a huge group, but just being here together, praying and thinking about the city and people in it, and now more and more all around the world. That's a powerful thing. I am there. And then this one, think about this. This is one of these verses that has a lot going on in it. I'll just say it, I won't spend too much time about it, but in Luke 22:32, Jesus said to who we call Peter, but at that time he said, I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith will not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. And this will come out in one of the resources I kind of share in my story, but I think it's interesting first that Jesus did intercessory prayer himself. And one of the books I've been reading this year that the pastor talks a lot about, he says, every pastor has a sermon, their main sermon, they're always coming back to, no matter how they talk about it differently or use different examples, right? They have sort of one big idea they really focus on or return to. And he says, Jesus did too. And his sermon was always the Father. Everything he said almost is the Father. Show you the Father. You've seen the Father. I came to do the will of the Father. I don't do anything but what the Father told me to do. All the time, the Father. And here he is praying to the Father for his, number one disciple, that his faith would be strong. And then he also said, and we know, how that story turned out. When you turned back, it is, when you have turned back, kind of reminds me of the prodigal son story too. When you turn back, strengthen your brothers. So I think it's something we do a lot of intercessory prayer here and also strengthening each other here. So think about that verse. Upcoming things. So in this small group idea, next week, and also the idea of 2 or 3, we're going to have 2 or 3 people share with us next week from Centered and another group. They're sort of the working group on the next King County prayer breakfast. Jeff Vansel, Alexa Phillips, and Chris Goff, however you say that. And their idea is not to have a big hotel meeting with hundreds of people in one place, but to have multiple small group, almost house church kind of meetings, and using some technology to knit them all together, but to have people in their neighborhoods praying as a King County, all out on these, hub and spoke approach. And I kind of joked with them. I said, you guys sound like you're following our lead here. So, I told them we're going out, stop meeting at the WAC and start meeting out in communities and places where people are already working and worshiping. So they're going to tell us about that next week. They wanted to get out ahead of it, and their date for that is April 19th. So put that away in the back of your mind, and we're going to try to support that as much as we can. Then another funny thing happened on the way to the forum. Al Erzman, who mentioned this a couple years ago to us live when he came to the WAC one time, has started this thing called Common Good Seattle. And he's brought together upwards over a dozen, almost 20 groups that are faith-based groups, not in church though, just doing their thing in Seattle, and wanted to have them know about each other and talk to each other, and even they have a common calendar. It's called commongoodseattle.org. And including, groups we know well. When I saw the list, about half of them have spoken to us before. Urban Impact, and then Kairos, of course. There's a handful of, there's also all the Christian colleges in the area were there. So they had a little Zoom meeting of these people to share their mission and pray for each other. Northwest University was there, Seattle Pacific University, deans, head of their, Christian business school or things like that. So we were part of that. It's interesting that, he's trying to do that. It reminded me of this verse we had in our church yesterday. Somebody was casting out demons in Jesus' name, and his disciples came and said, should we stop him? He's not with us. And Jesus said, if he's doing it in my name, if he's not against us, he's for us, so we don't, it's very interesting. We've always said that too. We don't need to own everything. We kind of try to support other people doing their missions and all be the different parts of the body. So yeah, Al's doing a really cool thing, and they are planning some event in June. I'll have to get more details later, but I think in the Westminster Chapel, which was part of the sponsor of that. So keep that in mind. We're gonna, we're now part of that in a way, and gives us other people that, I think even try to get Alan here later and tell us about that before their event comes up. Last thing I wanted to share is we just had a board meeting and figured out our next live prayer group meeting. And we're going to meet in a little over a month, probably about 5 weeks, at the Dads Ministry run by Marvin Charles, helping dads, especially dads, maybe others now, coming out of prison, reunite with their families, get on their feet, find a job, apartment, all the stuff that's so hard to do. And he's been faithfully doing that for so long. He's been here a number of times. He came here last year, the year before they had a big gala. Rosa Booker, who's been here a few times, she helped him run that thing. And so I think we really wanted to support them. Brian Grove, who's now on our board this past year, he took a job there. And so he's working for Marvin and helping do that. And they also have a new facility. So they moved. He said it's kind of close to Seattle University. So that will be wonderful. That'll be on March 31st. And hopefully as many of you guys can get there. That would be great to have another live breakfast. If you weren't there, what we did in the end of October was meeting at Urban Impact at the Emerald City Bible Fellowship, and had a great breakfast. And we had a number of them, the whole leadership team actually from Urban Impact shared with us what they do and why they do it and their story and whatnot. So also asked Brian to try to get a speaker or two to come here on Zoom before the March 31st and share with us more about the Dad's ministry, perhaps even people that have gone through it, give a little testimonial, how that changed their life. So stay tuned for that.
Bank, is that an event to raise money and breakfast, or is it attending one of the men's meetings that Marvin orchestrates?
No, it's going to be our prayer breakfast. So we'll have, coffee and breakfast.
Oh.
There will be a cost, but it'll be mainly just to cover the event. It doesn't really raise money. It'll be just imagine the old days at the WAC, except we'll be at Marvin's place near Seattle University.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So we'll put up there'll be a place to register and put in. We're going to try to keep the cost down to the same $20, I imagine. And then same time, and we'll just, all you need is the address, really. Yeah. And hopefully we'll have Marvin and or whoever else he wants to share with us that morning there as well. So we just set that up. They're excited. Marvin's very excited. Brian said he was very happy to have us come and support him. Yeah, so that'll be good. All right, that's it I have for all of that stuff. Before I launch into my own little story, any comments or questions on that other than what Mitch just said?
Do you know the time for that event, Banks?
What time is that breakfast, Bank?
Well, we're going to try to keep it roughly the same time. Launch into announcements and speakers 7:15, and if they'll let us have people come before for prayer. I remember, Christopher, the prayer was a little, the whole environment of people coming in and out was a little raucous, so we'll see how we can do that. But, we'll do our best. The whole thing will be a prayer, so, yeah. All right. I see Peter's iPhone.
And then a quick question about Common Good. Have there been subsequent meetings, and have we been a part of those gatherings at all?
Yes, and yes. There was the main one, the only meeting this year. They don't do a lot. I mean, his idea is maybe just to gather once a year and maybe have their own event once a year. So it was just last week on Zoom, and I was there, and yeah, Adele came too, and she was so floored and overwhelmed by how cool it was. She and I were reaching out to Katie Robertson of Anchored and thought they should be. She might want to be involved too. And there's just so many things going on around here with people doing good ministry, but just on their own in different places. And the universities especially just kept talking about how they wanted to collaborate with everybody and do put on things or help in any way they could. And I think it's a wonderful resource. I actually was chatting with Rolanda Cawthorn of Northwest University about they might host our next live prayer breakfast at Northwest. Yeah, so they're all just trying to, you know, be out there, be good community people too. So it's a great to have partners like that.
Bent, regarding March 31st, why don't we just start at 7 o'clock and have everybody who's in attendance there be part of a group prayer, not have a separate session.
Yeah, that may be a simpler, cleaner way to go. All in favor, say aye. All right, all right. Peter, good morning. Is that you?
Hey, good morning, Bengt. This is me.
Okay, okay. Just want to make sure. Glad to have you, brother.
It's good to be here.
All right. So I'll pivot now. I just want to, it's been an interesting year for me. I want to share some things that I've been experiencing on this pilgrimage that we're all on. All you guys, you know, everyone has their own challenges that we navigate, and up and down, and life hits you from sideways, and you know, unexpected turns come. And what's really neat is that people come here and they're willing to share their stories. Sometimes, you know, as I tell people when we're inviting them, it could be after the storm and you're through and you're, you know, in the sunshine again, and you tell us what happened and how it went and kind of looking back. And sometimes people come, you know, and they're still in the valley, and they're still, they don't know how they're going to get out, and or you know, still don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And you know, it's all part of our walk. And one of my core beliefs, having been in you know, I love this group because we're ecumenical, non-denominational, have people from various backgrounds. And part of my walk was the short summary was I was baptized Lutheran and confirmed Episcopalian, and then entered the Catholic Church, got married by a Catholic priest, and my kids were all baptized by, two of them baptized by the same priest. And he's actually a guy that I knew from right out of college at a conference in DC. We were together and ended up washing each other's feet on Holy Thursday before Good Friday. And, you know, something happens when you wash somebody's feet and you go through that extreme sort of symbol of service. And, you know, it's doing it because Jesus did it at the Last Supper. Peter, of course, protested and didn't want him to do it, but he said, if you don't let me serve you, you know, you won't be part of the boys band here. And so I've been in touch with this priest all this time. He actually flew to Maryland from Minnesota to baptize my one daughter, and the other one, he was still stationed, if you will, in Japan, which is, I spent some time with him when he was there too. We went to him. We happened to be going to Japan, but made a trip over to where he was, and he baptized my second daughter in Japan. Very special, long relationship with him. So I've been in touch with him this year too, as well. And one of the things I'll back up and start again chronologically here, but I even had to call him and ask, or wrote him once, you know, I said, you know, what about that story with Noah? You know, after they landed on the ark, and Noah was passed out, and his kids tried to cover him up, and he got mad at them because they saw his nakedness. And he laughed and laughed, and he's in a monastery, and they take care of the older priest, you know. And he said, when you're doing caretaking with people, you give up all that real quick about worrying about seeing people's nakedness. It, you know, you just, you get used to it. And I won't go into any more detail on that, but, you know, when you're taking care of older people, and we have my in-laws that live with us for 10 or 12 years too. We're at the point where we have to make sure they get in and out of the shower safely and everything else. And so, you know, you have to do what you got to do to take care of people. So this started out about a year ago. My brother and I were watching my mom, and after 18 months of lockdown and quarantine and being in her room in her assisted living facility, her dementia just skyrocketed. She had been a little bit getting Alzheimer's dementia, had gotten to the point where her doctor really told us we had to take away the car. She couldn't drive. And then, and then they wouldn't let my brother visit her. He lives in Maryland, not far from her, but we'd call her. I'd call her almost every other day, you know, that whole year. And she'd be just sitting around knitting or watching the news or taking a nap. And I really think that affected her a lot. And it came to the point where I told her we wanted to have her visit us, and she started just going out into the parking lot and even knocking on car door windows and saying, are you here for taking me to the airport? And she would have a suitcase by the front door. And they called us and said, you know, it's gone. We can't have that. She's a flight risk. It's dangerous. You know, she can't be out in the parking lot asking people to take you away. So they told us either put her in their memory care unit where there's 24-hour supervision, or get a 24-hour aide to, you know, be with her in her room. Both these things, as you guys know, are very expensive. Although the memory care, she had already been in and had a contract, so that wouldn't have cost too much. But so for the short term, we actually moved her there. And then once when my brother was able to go visit, he walked in and she was just sort of sitting in a chair in the common room with her head slumped over, kind of napping, and no one was really engaging with her. And so we thought, this is not really going to help her. She's just going to keep this decline. And at that point, the first miracle happened. I'll give you a short background on my household here. So we promised my in-laws a long time ago that we would take care of them in their old age. And they were living in Japan at the time. And Japan's nursing homes are very expensive. And again, the problem of not having maybe the ideal life there. So we took them, they sold their house and moved in with us about 10 years ago. And my mother-in-law had a long grudge, let's call it, against my mom for something she said or did. And this is part of my mother-in-law's story, but takes things always as if people are trying to hurt her or betray her. But she had always never liked being in the same room or even talking to my mom. And I think my mom was oblivious to all of that, which is sort of also part of her upbringing, without this sort of emotional intelligence, always just sort of barges through things. So it never occurred to me that we would bring my mom here. I would never have suggested that, never in a million years. And one night we were talking about her and showed her the picture my brother had sent of her just sitting alone in this chair with her head slumped over on her chest. And my mother-in-law said that we should take her in. And so we spent a little while processing this and thought about it. And we already had, a bathroom with a big walk-in shower we had made, and all the handrails, and had two people here, and even have this little electric wheelchair for my father-in-law when we go out so he can get places. So we thought, yeah, it's kind of like when you have one kid or two kids already, what's the third one? You have things going on. So talked to my brother about it. He couldn't do this because he has, middle school age kids, and not a flexible job, he or his wife. My wife and I have been working from home all year and figured that out from the pandemic. So it wasn't this easy, but long story short, we decided to go and move her here. Had to go over there and spend a week, and hired someone else who spent 3 weeks organizing all her stuff, sending half to the dump, giving away some things, gave my brother some things, but went and got her and flew her home. At this point, I'm going to pause and give you one book I started reading at that time. Heaven Starts Now, Becoming a Saint Day by Day. John Ricardo. And I'll give you, I know you guys want everything to be scriptural. He was running a church with like thousands and thousands of families in Detroit for many years. But he gives talks on the radio every day. I've been listening to the guy for years. Bought this book when it came out. This is all based on 4 different scriptures, and he goes through different things. But Jesus said, "Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." And then Paul wrote, "For this is the will of God, that you be sanctified." And then in the different Gospels, Jesus said, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you." And Peter, in his letter, wrote, "God made us to partake in the divine nature." And he said the Orthodox Church calls this divination, like that. This is what we're called to. And he said, we're called to become a saint. And I thought about this. I started posting my journey on Facebook when I got my mom. And so for me, Facebook has become almost completely about my mom and sharing it with people. And that gave me a lot of support. Let's say people that are doing the same thing or have gone through this before. And actually that helped me prepare for how to react to things that started happening. And people will say on there, "Oh man, you're being a saint." And I'll just say, well, none of this, that if so, that's not me. You can't become a saint on your own. Almost like you can't be saved, you can't have grace, even can't have faith almost sometimes on your own. You got to ask for that. So there's been a lot of asking, a lot of surrendering, a lot of faith, a lot of grace. But he says you can do it. So we got her here. I'm going to start showing you guys some pictures of what she looked like when she first came, and how some things changed. And twice during the year, she had these huge declines all of a sudden. First time in July, second time in November. And we thought she had a stroke, and thought that, that was our new normal. And then she got better. And so there's been all this up and down. That, again, a couple of other resources I'll share in a minute kind of have been helping me prepare for that. Let me see if I can get my photos here on this other screen. I'm going to flip through some of these kind of quickly here. Going backwards. Okay. This is what I found in her room. We only took a few pictures away from her room. That's my brother who's adopted on top and me on the bottom. These are the things she had around her at in her apartment. So this is where she lived, and those were her 2 best friends on her floor that she had to say goodbye to. And the guy in the right for the last year had been really helpful, calling me, telling me what she was doing, how she was. And he even, when we took her car away, he started driving her to her like dentist appointments and things. Awesome. We were very thankful for that guy. But it became to the point where the aides in her house called us and said, he's almost doing as much as like an aide. Like he sort of shouldn't be that dependent on him. It's good to have a friend who can do some things, but not that much. And this was one of the aides in the place. And when I came and found her, I was just shocked how much weight she had lost. And I think she had been forgetting to eat and drink. And she did have to go to the ER once, and they said she was dehydrated. So it was really just even a physical danger, her being in her room all the time by herself. So I got her, and we went to, she and my father had their own spiritual journey, and they went from the Episcopal Church to being Quakers later in their life. And so we're at the Quaker Meeting House where she buried my dad, and we went to visit him before we left. That's his little marker. And so she gave me my marching orders. You know, this was the one thing when I asked her, would you be okay coming to live with us? She said, but I wanted to be buried next to your father. I said, okay, done, we'll do that. And then she was okay. So that's where she's going to be. Went up on the hill overlooking the Naval Academy and looked down to that's where my dad worked for 35 years. And then went and saw across the Chesapeake Bay, that's my nephew on their little 1 acre out in the God's country, the farmland. That's my brother and his wife. Even then, there she was, very with it. And then we got home, that's her with my in-laws, who are like 8 and 10 years older than her. At that time, we'd log in and she would join her Quaker meeting by Zoom in the mornings. Was doing a lot of gardening when we first got here, hanging out with, they started talking together, her and my mother-in-law. She would take walks with my father-in-law. She was playing the piano. She was still knitting for the first month or two. She knit chemo caps and would bring them to hospitals. And I was her hat test dummy for the first month or two she was here. She would take walks, and then I noticed she would take my mother-in-law's hand like they were two little 5-year-old girls, walking down the street, and sit outside in the springtime after their gardening. More hats. That's just April, first few weeks. We take a lot of walks, walk down to the park. More hats, more gardening. About that time, though, she started tangling up all her knitting, and she stopped knitting, which she'd done all her life. She could sit for hours and knit, or even whatever else was going on, she'd be knitting in the background. And it just got too complicated for her. Still having fun, though. This is us going out to see a soccer game in the summer sun. So July 4th, we went over and saw the town of Poulsbo and all their Viking stuff they got there. And she grew up in a town in Kansas called Little Sweden, USA, and they sell all these little knickknacks. And she felt right at home in Poulsbo. And she was doing great that day, and even goofing around. She has this goofy sense of humor from her dad. And then the next 2 days later, she had this thing that looked like a stroke, and we brought her to the ER. And I sat there in the ER with her for 18 hours all night, and they did every test they could find and imagine, didn't really find anything. And she brought her home like this, and she was couldn't keep her eyes open, slumped over. We had to feed her, had to walk her. It was kind of frightening and even still, I'm not looking forward to, if this would come back. So we were feeding her. We went and found the UW has this brain center in Harborview, beautiful place. Found a lovely woman there who took pictures of her brain and showed us on her computer how there's gray matter there, but you see all the black space in and around the gray matter. That's empty space because her gray matter is shrinking. It didn't used to be that way, or it shouldn't be that way. So it was confirming. What's funny is you go through this, it kind of like, I felt like Job, like for her, but also me, everything's kind of being stripped away from her. And she stopped remembering. She has a hard time pulling out any proper nouns anymore, of names of people or places or anything like that. And the first time I took her to get a new primary care doctor, this was the first time it happened. We sat down and the doctor said to her, "Who is this you brought with you?" And she said, "Oh," she patted my knee, "this is my husband." And I nearly jumped off the chair. But she got better after that, started taking walks again. There's her sister. Walking, helping me with projects, got really fascinated with the level. Out in the garden again, my son Noah would come over and they would goof around and dance to music. Her niece came over and visited, and she really had a good time connecting with her. We took her to Orcas Island with us in the summer. At that time, she saw this photograph, and that's her at 4 years old. And I had her kind of pose like that. She was enjoying it, knew who it was. She looked at this photograph a few days ago and said, "That's my daughter." She didn't even know that was her. All fall, she came to the soccer games with my daughter. And then something happened in November, and she started like having this tremor, and her food started falling on the floor, and almost couldn't get out of bed again. Had to feed her again. Had to help her. That's the aid we've been having come for the last 3 or 4 months. Went to the doctor, and we walked up there, and then she almost just was falling asleep and couldn't walk back down to the car, and would be just laying, sometimes have these waves of emotion come over her, you know, just thinking about things or getting sad about things. Trying to do some physical therapy that time, did more MRIs of her brain. And then she started to get better again. That's her hanging out with her sister and their family. Often though, just getting tired, falling asleep. We're trying to get her doing artwork. Christmas came and she was the life of the party again, getting some colorful presents and goofing around. And every time she goes out with Masuka, her aide, who's from Tanzania, has a lot of fun. Started putting on the stockings at and then sometimes would just do silly things. Like I came down late and she was getting herself dressed, and that's how she put on the stuff. So I'm gonna stop sharing there. So here's how I'll finish up with this. Here's how I started thinking about this lately. Earlier on, I was thinking, it's kind of like getting married and taking the marriage vows, you know. And when we brought her here, her sister who lives in Seattle said, "You guys know what you're doing?" And I just laughed and said, "Well, we know we're doing this, but no, obviously not. We're entering this unknown world here." And there's been a long grief process too. I've had to just be aware of myself, kind of losing her little by little, like this long goodbye. A friend of mine during the year, so I thought of it like taking the marriage vows. You know, I proposed to my wife 6 months after we met, and same thing. You know, did I know everything that was going to come as part of those vows? No. I'll tell you, it's a whole nother level of sacrifice and commitment when I've seen my wife showering my mother and she may or may not even know who she is, but just doing that because you promised. And a friend of mine told me to read a book by the Navy pilot Jim Stockdale, who got shot down in Vietnam. I have it here. He wrote a book called Thoughts of a Philosophical Fighter Pilot. He said what saved his life was a small book. He happened to be able to go to grad school at Stanford a few years before going to Vietnam. Professor gave him a book by a Greek writer who lived right within 100 years of Christ, Epictetus, just a little handbook. It was like, the name means like at hand, handbook, the manual, called the Enchiridion. And it was a Stoic philosophy, which he said was really governed a lot of stuff in those couple hundred years before and after Christ. And Paul, who came from Tarsus, was totally imbued, even as a Jew, a Hellenic Jew, in this philosophy. But it could be summed up almost like the Serenity Prayer, Lord, let me know the things I can control and the things that I can't, and know the difference and work on the one and totally detach from the other one. And when he was being shot down, he had almost memorized this book. When he was falling after he ejected from his plane, this is a sentence. He wrote a long article about it in the 70s after he came back. He spent 7 years in the Hanoi prisoner of war. He thought, I'm going to be here at least 5 years, and I'm now leaving the modern world of technology, entering the world of antiquity and the laboratory of Epictetus. And, he said, you realize really quickly, there's a lot of things you don't control, especially when you're a prisoner of war. Your health and your wealth and your schedule and everything else. And this analogy, I'm not obviously going through anything like what he went through, but, taking this on has been like an amazing spiritual walk of realizing how much or how little I'm in control. And he said also reading Job, which I've thought a lot about, things can be taken away from you. And what's your reaction? That's the key thing. Are you going to curse God, or are you going to stay true to God and kind of stay true to your walk and your promises and find a way to praise him? It's made me a lot more attentive. It's been like having a 3-year-old again, because you don't want them to hurt themselves or do something silly. So someone always has to be aware and watching her and around and attentive. So that's been the walk this year. And it reminded me when Paul wrote in one of his letters, I've learned to be content in any circumstance, whether rich or poor, in prison or free, abundant or in want, and I can be content. So it's ongoing. We're here. She's doing okay now, but often goes through times of being more emotional, and old stories come back all the time about her father. Thought about her a lot when we did this whole thing lately with Show Me the Father and importance of a father. One of her stories, that I knew this when I was younger, but I've noticed it more coming out, that her father on the farm in the Dust Bowl after the Great Depression never told her directly in words, I love you. And so, that's how she was raised. And I see that in different little ways coming out. And so I tell her that now. And this is my, who knows if it sinks in, but way to give back and turn around. So that, see, our time's up. Want to leave you guys some time to say some things too. Thanks for listening. Go ahead, Dan. I can't hear you, Dan. It was working before.
Let me jump in here, Bengt, real quick. Well, Dan gets his sound up, but the impact in your family and therefore your coming together as a family. Do you want to share a little bit about that? I mean, with your children, your wife, and maybe what your daily routine was and how that's changed.
Yeah, well, the kids, we only have, so out of 3 kids, my son's living in town in an apartment with a friend. My middle daughter's in college in Massachusetts, and my youngest is still here. And she has really taken over her grandfather's care and feeding and giving medicine, and she's become like a master caregiver herself. That doesn't give her a lot of time to help here, but she's very good listening to her. It's hard for her though, because we've noticed, here's another funny thing. You know, my mom was always a very strong sort of equal rights for women person. Ironically, she will listen to me and take direction from me better than anyone else. She really will push back against the women in the house if they tell her something they want her to do. So it can get annoying for my daughter. Just say that she actually, and we know she even responds better to my son. It's been a funny thing. She did some weird things. We all got COVID, and my mom's very touchy, and well, she'll go touch you and hug you. And she didn't understand she shouldn't do that, and still was doing that to my in-laws. So for the last month and a half, they just kind of stayed away from her. They almost like don't trust her. And Japanese people are not very touchy-feely anyway. So that was weird even before the COVID for them. But we all had to just sort of adjust our routines. It's taken definitely some time away from my work and other things, but we got an aide coming in here in September once we sort of figured out some of the medical things. And so I'm able to get my time back now, but I did for a few months there, I was really with her like all the time over the summer. Dan?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, having your story sounds so familiar because, as you know, I just walked through that same thing with my mom. I think your mom's probably the time is lengthening out. In retrospect, my mom really took a turn for the worst in July, and it was just a steady boom, boom, boom. And during that time, I kept thinking of that passage about death, you know, oh, death, where is thy sting? And I thought, it's kind of disgusting because it's an ugly process watching someone, in my mom's case, someone who has always been vibrant and active and engaged, just watching her slowly disengage physically and mentally and in every other way. And Gary, you probably have as good a perspective as anybody on this with your work. But I found myself frequently saying that verse is a little disgusting. In the middle of it, I don't like that. I don't find this experience anything that resembles victorious. Yet at the same time, and I was with my mom every day for at least a couple of hours from later part of September all the way through the first part of December. Yet I don't, or let me rephrase that. I cherish every minute of that time. And the phrase that I've used so many times is that in watching my mother die, she really taught me how to live. And, you know, maybe that is for me, maybe I think sometimes that is the victory, is that in watching her die a little bit every day, she really taught me the value of living and living fully, living completely. And that's a lesson that I hope will stay with me the rest of my life.
I think it will.
Dan, thanks for sharing that. And Bengt, I just so appreciate what you brought this morning. It's what I have always heard of as what's known as that labor of love.
Yeah.
You do it not because you have to, although I mean there's somewhat of that there, but it just really it really ministered to me. My brother, who passed just before Christmas, had a stroke, and I spent 6 weeks in the ICU with him, and kind of helped him to get back on his feet. And so I had just a small taste of that. And then I had a good friend who was a pastor, and he was dying of cancer and was completely pretty much incapacitated. And so what you were talking about in the very beginning in terms of, you know, when I went to see him, I actually went out to Utah to speak at his church's retreat. And I got to help him use the restroom because he was completely blind, and you know, all dignity and everything is just gone because you just do what you need to do to help that person. And it really changes your perspective on life and everything. And to see your mom kind of in this progressive stage must be incredibly difficult. And so I just want to thank you for sharing, and it's given me a new level of appreciation for what we have, and also just for what you do. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Sure.
thank you. Yeah, it does, Dan, too, both of you guys. I know, you know, you and your brother, and I mean, we all, so you can get hit with this somehow, sometime, but it does make you appreciate what you have and maybe spend time with the people you have more. And you know, my middle daughter, back to Chris's question, made a comment once that why are you guys bringing her here? You always taught us she was, you know, painful and annoying. I was like, oh no, we kind of left her with that feeling, because there was a time when we lived in Maryland and the kids were little that she would not listen to us and what we wanted her to do with our kids. And she would take them out driving, and she would be distracted driving, talking to them, turn her head back and talk to them. We thought she was going to kill our kids in a car wreck, or she just wouldn't listen to us. So we had to limit. There was a point where we wouldn't let her be alone with our kids, literally, when she was herself and healthy, you know. And so our daughter saw this, that we, you know, actually that same person we took in to take care of.
Bengt, I admire your willingness to be so transparent today. I am struggling with wanting to be in the Hallmark store and give you an acknowledgement. But what I'm wanting to do is more about, I can't imagine what you're enduring with 3 elder residents in your home, navigating care, sustaining objectivity, seeking support, spiritual guidance, the literature that you suggested, sustaining your marriage, navigating your job. I've been struck by your frequency of posting pictures of your mother on Facebook, and I have valued as a human being, being an outside observer of your story and your experience. My parents are gone. They were insistent in life saying, I am not going to be a burden. And they were not. But during the course of their short sense of their passing, it changed me.
Mm.
And I believe that's the process that you're also in. It's evolving, it's experiencing it, it's expansive. There's a dutiful quality about it, but there's also love that winds around the duty. And it sounds like that's a part of how you're sustaining this long journey. Bravo, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah, I did start posting and trying to be transparent from day one, just for my own sanity, honestly, and to like put it out there. Like there were some posts I was like, holy heck, what the, and put it out and get some people's, you know, comments or reactions. You know, I've gotten closer with a couple of people one was an old colleague in Maryland I used to work with, went through this with her mom. Another one's a college classmate of mine who's going through it right now with her mom. And very similar thing, and very wise. You know, early on, people told me don't try to correct her or tell her what day it is or finish her, you know, bring her back to reality, kind of enter her world and just go with it. And that's been an interesting dance. And you know, it's funny watching, my son has really come out and bloomed and blossomed in that. It's like I don't know where he got this, but he did take some creative courses in college, but it's like he's in a improv class, you know, and she'll say something just wacky off the wall, and he'll just like start continuing a story and make up something equally wacky, and the two of them will go back and forth for a while. And I'm like, thank God, you know, it takes a little mental energy off the two of them together.
Well, it's also allowing me to have a bit more of a 3D perspective of you and your life versus the one dimension of just seeing your face, having a chance to have a story of walking alongside you. I need to sign off, so I want to send blessings to you. And,
Thank you, brother.
So, till next time.
So Bengt, I hope you're prepared to live to be about 150 years old, because that's what's going to happen. I'm thinking of the verse, honor your father and mother, that your days will be long in the land that I've given you. And the honoring that you're providing, you're about halfway through life at the most. You're not even halfway. You're just kind of coming out of high school here. So I just wanted to really to mention what a gift. The thing that's kind of struck me throughout all this, what a gift that your example is to not only your family, but to all those who are kind of walking alongside this process virtually. So people seeing the example of you, they're inspired in their own lives one way or another to be likewise. And that to me is one of the greatest legacies perhaps that you could ever hope to leave with your life. So thank you for that. You inspire all of us here.
Thank you. And we hope our kids are seeing it, and we keep saying, you know, this is just what people do. Everyone does this, you know, and we'll try to be nice and listen to you and take good direction when, you know, you have to take care of us.
The thing is, Bengt, it's not what everybody does. And it's not just what
I know,
people
don't
do.
tell my kids that.
No, but it is important for them to know that, because it is what you have chosen to do. And so it truly is a labor of love. So it is, as Randy said, it is an inspiration to all of us. And I just so appreciate hearing the story today. It's really been impactful.
Thanks. Perry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a little about your brother. Where does he live?
Queenstown, Maryland. You cross the Bay Bridge and it's all flat farmland with deer and ducks, and he loves that life out there. But he was it's a little over an hour from DC. My mom was in Columbia in that area, so it took him a little bit to get there.
And what are his thoughts about all of this? I mean, what kind of input and help does he offer, or can he give, or is it very limited?
Yeah, you know, it's a funny thing. If you guys are ever parents or teachers, you know, it's sometimes the troubled kids that you remember the most. And she talks about him a lot, and we do try to do a FaceTime or Zoom call, you know, a couple times a week, and or a telephone call. So, but she still remembers that he's her son, even though she might not remember that I'm her son. And you know, they adopted him when he was like a year old, and you know, he got in trouble in high school, and they had to pull him out of public school, put him in private school. Wasn't sure how, you know, he was going to make it, and first marriage was 1 year long, and then divorced, and he was depressed about that for a while. But he's got a beautiful life now, wife and 2 healthy kids, and they're doing well. And when she was in Maryland, she would go there almost every weekend and like spend the night with them. And honestly, that got to be a little much for them. And then when we decided we had to do something, and I said I'd take her over here, some people asked, were you okay with that? He laughs. He tells me, he's like, yeah, like it's better for her. I couldn't have done it, and so he's grateful. And he talks to her probably more now because it helps me. I can put her on the FaceTime with her. It keeps her really happy for about half an hour, and yeah, so we're closer than ever probably.
Bengt, I just say that, yeah, I've really enjoyed your, well, maybe enjoyed is not fair, but your, as other people have said, your transparency on Facebook and.
Can you speak up a little, Chandler?
Oh yeah, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I know my microphone's not very good. But I've been fascinated by your post on Facebook, and what it's done for me is it's called me to, to pray for you, but then also consider my own situation. And I'm kind of I'm on the other side, that my parents are still mentally, even at 86 and 91 years old, mentally very strong, but are physically deteriorating very quickly. And just over the last few months, my dad is bladder cancer, broken vertebrae, broken ribs. And this is just in the last, since December. And he's just like, what's going on? And I said, well, Dad, I don't think it's what's going on right now. You're 91 years old, and this is something that's gone on over time. But it's really hard for him. And I just make sure, and I think I've been inspired by you, but if they say, I can't, my mom says I can't figure out my computer, then I just I go over there, and I'm 15 miles away, and in a little commute from Edmonds, but I just go because I know that I've always thought my parents were going to live forever, and I think maybe all of us sort of feel that way. And I still can't picture them being gone, but I just go over there, and and honestly, with my mom, she'll say my internet's not working, and I go over there, and her it'll be her window is just slid down to the bottom of her screen, and I take her mouse and I'll explain that to her because I know that's what's going on, and I explain it to her over the phone, and she can't figure it out. So I go over there and I click on it and I lift it up and I say, look, and that's why she missed the fellowship. That's why they missed the fellowship last week, because she had slid her window down to the bottom of the screen. She said, all that I see is the tabs, but there's no window. So, but that's so, and then I make fun of them. So there's also a little bit of humor in that too, is that I'm able to, I give them a hard time, but I'm also, I want to be there for them. And they just always say, you do so much for us. You do so much for us. And I say, I'm not even scratching the surface of what you've done for me.
Yeah.
So, and the blessing, the blessing that they've been to me. Yeah. So, yeah. And the one other thing that I wanted to say is that, and I may have mentioned this earlier, is on Facebook, is that your post, encouraged me to pray for you in your situation, but also pray for my situation, and others that are in the same the same boat, one way or the other. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to